Welcome to everyone. My name is Bernie Erickson from Facility Solutions Group, and today we're taking a deeper dive into far UV, 222 nanometer UV. With me today is PJ Piper, CEO of Far UV Technologies, and anyone who has attended my other webinars, you know that we have a tendency to be very broad and talk about a lot of things, but there's been a tremendous amount of interest in far UV and the many benefits that it brings. And so today we're going to take a deeper dive, and I don't have to do all the talking here. PJ is our resident expert in the field, and after a few slides, I'm going to be turning it over to him. So just want to talk briefly. Oh, this is just my little disclaimer slide. PJ and I, he might be the scientist though. See, normally I put this down and say I'm neither a doctor or a scientist, but I may give him credit for being one or the other. Talk a little bit about the cooperative AEPA. You notice on that first slide that we did have a contract number, and these products and what we're showing you here today is covered under a cooperative purchasing agreement with the AEPA. And who is the AEPA? It's a multi-state co-op that is really a kind of a co-op of co-ops. It's over 28 different co-ops locally, or local co-ops in each individual state, and these co-ops could be CalSave in California, TechSpy, KPN, CREC in Connecticut, right? These are all the local co-ops, and a local agency, as I say, in your state manages the co-op agreement. It helps you to, number one, act quickly, which you surely do want to do as you're looking at a lot of these technologies based on why we're buying them to fight COVID-19, and avoid the duplication of bidding expense in the whole process. You can go and place orders immediately, and you're leveraging that volume of 28. It says 27, but it's actually 28 different states right now that are all leveraged together, their buying power. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to PJ, and we will allow us to get into the technical stuff here. All you, PJ.
Okay. Yep. Let me just get my screen up so I can drive. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yep. Perfect.
Okay. Great. So thank you so much, Bernie. And you know, we've teamed with Facility Solutions Group to put this really in all kinds of applications. When we'll talk a little bit more about those. But in terms of the problem statement, you know, we're trying to reopen the economy. We're trying to go back to school, but we really want to do it in a safe way. And I think there are a handful of best practices that everybody's trying to employ, but they're particularly difficult in certain applications, schools of which are one of them. Why is that? Well, social distancing. I think we've been trained since we were 3 years old to stand in line and, you know, to get close and get in groups and things like that. So whether it's student-to-student interaction or teacher-to-student interaction, it's very difficult to maintain that spacing. Wearing face masks is not universally mandated, perhaps surprisingly to me, but even if it was, it's difficult to enforce, and particularly among, you know, younger students who aren't as attuned to it and may not, you know, be able to do that on a consistent basis. And of course, proper hand hygiene has really always been a challenge. I don't know how many people do, you know, go get through the whole twinkle, twinkle, little star while they're, you know, scrubbing their hands before they rinse them. So really all three of the primary defenses we have against pathogens, whether they're in air or on surfaces, are particularly challenging in the educational environment. And so what we'd like to introduce to you is far ultraviolet light, which is the first ultraviolet light. It's a portion of the light spectrum, which they've determined is completely safe for use in occupied rooms for humans and animals. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But the advantages of it is it's the equivalent, per a couple of relatively recent scientific reports, of an equivalent of an extra N95 mask for everybody in those environments wearing them. Now, when we say that, we're not saying don't wear masks, don't socially distance, don't wash your hands. You should do all those things. But what this is meant to do is really pick up any of the times, either somebody just makes a mistake, their mask falls down, they don't realize somebody's in the room and their mask is off, or they have to get close to each other or walk through the same door, which happens all the time. And this is a way where it's just always on. It's a set it and forget it solution. It's always disinfecting, and it's disinfecting at the time when there's 100% of the contamination events are when someone's in the room breathing, talking, coughing, or sneezing. It doesn't happen magically overnight. It actually happens when the people are in the room. So you don't want to wait until the end of the day to have somebody come in and do disinfection. You want to do it when that contamination event occurs, so you can immediately start helping. A little bit about who we are. Far UV Technologies did not come into the scene in March and April. A lot of companies did to try to, kind of get involved in the remediation. But we've been working on Far UV technology since 2016. And really, since then, it was really only two companies making end products. One was Boeing, and they were making Far UV bathrooms for airplanes. And then the other one was us. And we started out with working with NASA on foodborne illnesses, so E. coli, salmonella, listeria, those kind of issues. And then we ended up working further with the Army on hospital-acquired infections, C. diff and MRSA, and the kind of things that, 1 in 9 people who go into the hospital for a surgery end up actually with something that they didn't go in there with. And some of them are quite deadly. And then most recently, of course, we're working with the Air Force specifically on SARS-CoV-2 remediation. We are the only, Far UV products currently made in the United States, and that's helpful, and it's also by design. All of our military contracts want to buy U.S.-made products, and the supply chain is very robust that we've been able to create. We do have multiple academic and commercial partners. Columbia University Medical Center has probably been doing research the longest, Dr. Brenner, and but also more recently, Harvard and Johns Hopkins have been working with us on extending the data and the research associated with the safety and the efficacy of Far UV in various applications. About 3 or 4 weeks ago, we signed a strategic technology license with Boeing. And so now we've merged our two portfolios of intellectual property to really bring a best of breed product portfolio together and robust intellectual property portfolios together. And we'll talk a little bit about that. We were focusing more on ceiling lamps to disinfect general spaces, and that's a lot of what we'll talk about today. They were more focused on getting people traveling again through airplanes and airports. And so they had a very high-powered wand, which we'll talk about and may be of interest to some people. If anybody has any questions at all, our website is faruv.com, and our direct line is 816-492-7020. Of course, you can always contact Bernie and FSG. They're very attuned and up to date on our technologies as well. There are probably every other version of this website that you can think of has been taken by people trying to spring up their own little Far UVC type companies. So we do recommend focusing on the one that we have here. Where are we installed? First question we get, well, who else is using it? Well, because we started in defense contracting and government contracting, we've gotten a lot of traction in the military. So right now we've been ranked, I think, out of 292 technologies of any type, the #1 technology that the Air Force is developing and mobilizing. So here's basically what it looks like. And actually, I can even show you, if you've got my picture here on my ceiling. It's basically, it looks and acts a lot like a smoke detector. It's a set it and forget it solution. You put it in place, and it's just continually disinfecting. So in this application, they may need to sign in here. There's a lot of people that need to get in and out of here on a very quick basis to get their flights. And so hard to socially distance. They're pretty good about mask wearing and the rest of it, but it's just what they've proven is no matter how well we do at that, there's still transmission. And so I think this added layer of protection helps them, because you can't afford to have both your mechanics out or you can't fly. And so for schools, you can't afford to have both of your 5th grade teachers out of a classroom, what do you do, right? And so we're continually getting asked these questions, and I think those are some of the ways we're really going to be able to help. We're, of course, not only a defense-related product. There are a lot of commercial applications. The first people who contacted us in March, when this thing kind of really went crazy, were medical and dental clinics. And so we've been very active in the healthcare space, hospitals, medical clinics, dental clinics. Transportation has also been a very big early adopter. So whether it's commuter or long haul busing companies, we've had a few companies completely transition over so they can have this. If you travel through the Atlanta airport, you'll find that our far UV is providing disinfection throughout some of those facilities as well. And of course, as you're entering hotels and other applications like that, elevators, things like that, anywhere there's a confined space where there's high traffic, there's high risk. And those are the areas where we've had a lot of interest. And I think what you're going to find is literally all of these places on here that we list, we're in advanced discussions, many of which are in deep pilots, and they're going to start transitioning. So I think you're going to see this more every day in all kinds of applications. Schools are no exception. I mean, you've got a lot of people close together. You're not limiting your population, or it's not as easy to. There's bathrooms, there's athletic facilities. You're breathing hard. You're actually creating more respiratory, potential contamination events. School buses are another one where it's very difficult. We've had areas of the country where they're saying, well, you got to keep all the windows open. But, as we enter January, February, you're trading one issue for another. You may be safer in some ways by having that additional ventilation, but if you're below zero, you may have other health risks associated with that. So I think we've got a good present. I'm excited to show you some of the stuff we've been doing specifically in your space. First question everybody asks, wait a minute, I thought ultraviolet light isn't good for you. And since we're 6 years old, we're told, hey, put on your sunscreen, you go outside in the sun and you can get UV. It's absolutely true. You get ultraviolet light radiation from the sun in these wavelengths between 280 and 315. This is the UV associated with sunlight. And those longer wavelengths can penetrate the skin and go in, and they can cause cancerous issues in your skin. UVC, which probably cleans about half of the water you drink, no matter where you are. Almost all municipalities use ultraviolet light to clean the water supply. Very effectively gets rid of Giardia and all these other contaminants in the water. But it's been shown that too can also penetrate into the skin, not as fast, not as far. And so you don't often get as many incidents of this, but for 100 years, they've known that this wavelength of roughly 254 nanometers was an excellent germicidal capability to kill any possible bacteria or virus. So it's widely used, but it was always sheltered once they found out you could have skin or eye issues. Well, what they didn't realize was that if you actually went down a little bit further and made narrower wavelengths, those wavelengths from a physical standpoint could not penetrate human tissue. And so they simply can't penetrate the cells of animals or humans. And as a result, they get caught in the very most outer layer of dead skin that sloughs off every day as dandruff. And as a result, it hits nothing. None of these cells, your skin cells on the very outside, are alive. They're just dead cells here. It doesn't hit into the epidermis or any of the basal area. So totally safe for use, has been studied extensively by Columbia University Medical Center in everything from petri dishes up through animals that are 1,000 times more sensitive to UV light. And then more recently in Asia, they've done studies of very significant exposures on human tests and gone through that. And I think what's interesting here, and I'll show you that our current exposure that we have is about 23 millijoules. This is the metric that they use, is the most we expose, but they've done tests up to about 1,000 millijoules per centimeter squared and have had absolutely zero impact. not even reddening of the skin or anything. It's simply the physics simply can't penetrate any human or animal tissue. And what's interesting also is that while far UV is getting a whole bunch of attention right now, there's actually been safety standards in place by multiple international organizations for several years, decades actually, that show what the safety levels are for any of the wavelengths here. And so we don't operate above any of these because those studies have shown that instead of being 23 millijoules, that it could be 500 or 1,000 millijoules. We do actually expect within the next month or two that these could be raised up to about 100. They're still going to be very conservative on it, but what it means is that we're going to be able to disinfect much faster and much more significantly throughout your space. But even right now, you'll find that we can have 31 log reductions, or a 90% reduction in the viral load at head level, at your respiratory levels, in every 8-hour period. So throughout the course of the day, instead of having somebody wipe down something and maybe get 50% clean once, and then throughout the day you're exposed, you know, we're about every 15 minutes, we're getting a 90% reduction at head level. So it's a big deal. Some people have wondered, hey, do you have an FDA registration? And the answer is no. We talked to the FDA. We're not a medical device. We are not curing COVID. We're not removing COVID from the carriers who have it. What we are doing is we're treating the SARS-CoV virus that they're expelling when they're breathing, talking, coughing, sneezing, or singing into the space, whether it's in the air or whether it's on the surfaces that they land on. And so what the FDA quickly confirmed was that you are much more like a Clorox wipe than you are a medical device. So you're regulated by the Environmental Protection Agency. So the EPA, we have our establishment number here, and we follow all the FIFRA labeling requirements of you know, making sure we're appropriate in the efficacy that we state, et cetera. One other interesting thing here is I think a lot of people have seen these cool visions that look, you know, here's what a coronavirus looks like. It almost looks like a ball with little Shrek horns coming off all over the place. 222 is different because we actually destroy all these little receptors here off the edges of the balls. And as a result, they simply can't penetrate human cells at that point. So we basically completely deactivate them. We actually don't destroy the RNA or DNA as much as 254 does, but because these are on the outside, we're actually a much more effective killing mechanism than 254. We're faster, we don't need as much power, and as a result, even though we're able to put anywhere from 6 to 10 times more into an occupied space than 254, we also are more effective at what we do put in there. So that's an interesting thing. It also means that if you're testing for it, some test methodologies like PCR doesn't work as well, because all that does is it detects whether this DNA or RNA is there. And so ours will still be there, but it'll just be in a dead blob of organic material, so you can't see it there. So there's been some confusion on the testing, and we're working to make sure everybody's on that. It doesn't mean when you test your students, if you do testing at your schools, like our kids at our school, that the PCR still works for that, because if it's inside the person, that is a very good indicator, and all those are fine. This is just another level of testing in the field. So how, you know, what are the advantages? Well, it's a set it and forget it solution. Again, once you put it up, you get rid of a lot of the human error associated with mask wearing and hand washing and things like that. It's continuous and it's autonomous for the entire time your space is occupied. We don't use any chemicals in the environment, so we're not creating any caustic issues there. And perhaps most importantly, we're not subject to airflows, humidity, or temperature. Some of the other disinfection technologies rely on airflow either through an HVAC system to deliver or treat it through a ventilation system, which often may take only 40 to 60% of the air through it, or wouldn't have the time to fill a room with it. So I think it's a much more comprehensive disinfection solution that you know is always working throughout your space. It's also easy to validate and certify, which we'll show you on the next page. we're testing this in a variety of things. Like I mentioned before, we focused on hospital-acquired infections, so we've proven its efficacy against things like MRSA and C. diff, and I'm sure most of you have heard of somebody who ended up with those troublesome things at a hospital, or the foodborne disinfection. But I want you to also envision a world where if these were prevalent everywhere, you'd be destroying not just SARS-CoV-2, but you're going to be treating these things, and maybe you don't have as much MRSA and C. diff in your schools, but you probably have things like the common cold and flu, mold, strep throat, pink eye. All of these are airborne or surface-related pathogens that we would be reducing the viral load of throughout your space. And so we're going to keep running our way down this list. Some of these are in the animal health space, and some of them are just nasty things that we never hope land here. But a lot of these are things that we've just accepted as a norm. And hey, it's a shame we had a measles outbreak. Well, I think that the silver lining in this pandemic is that there are going to be a greater awareness of the kind of tools we can use to virtually eradicate disease in our occupied spaces going forward. In general, under the current threshold limit values for safety, we can disinfect, and I mentioned that, about 90% of SARS-CoV-2, if it were present in a space, about every 16 minutes at head level. It takes a little bit longer at desk level, and of course it takes longer at the floor. But from a safety perspective, we measure to the top of the head of an NBA player standing directly under the light. So we make it so that it's really kind of user-proof. They almost can't go over a safety threshold, but they can still achieve very effective treatment. And we'll work with users to figure out the best places to put these lights to make sure you maximize disinfection. One other thing that's kind of interesting is we don't know whether Timmy gets sick every fall and he's fairly immunocompromised, or whether he never gets sick and he might be over here. But an interesting thing on disinfection is that there's probably a bell curve of people, and regardless in the room of where you are, even if we achieve 50% disinfection, we might protect another half of the people in that room. Similarly, it's very difficult for us to tell you exactly how many kids you're going to prevent from getting something, because we don't know where in this curve they fall. So that's say, look, in general, you're going to have 50% of your kids will be at that average immune system. And if we can continually knock out 90% every 16 minutes, you're going to have a significant percentage of your population protected. Sourcing and installation comes in, we ship it in a box, very simple. You open it up, it's very self-explanatory. If you have a drop ceiling, there's a little clip on the back here, clips right onto this. It takes our installers anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes to install each light. So they can often come in the course of a day or two, outfit your facility. If you don't have a drop ceiling, it attaches to a regular ceiling light fixture. We're right now the only disinfection technology that's very easy to validate and certify in application. So we have our monitors where we can actually look at this. We can come into your space. We can find out exactly how many milliwatts of this exposure is coming in. We could say, okay, in your conference room on this date, with your 9-foot ceiling, you had this many milliwatts of exposure. We expose this for 11,000 seconds over an 8-hour period, and that ends up with this amount of dosage. Well, that means you're getting about 29 one-log reductions, or 90% reductions in the viral load, or about 1 every 16.4 minutes. And our field electricians, or FSGs, can validate that and sign that so that you can feel comfortable that it's not just a purple light in the ceiling. You know what it's doing, and it's delivering. The other thing, and one of the really great reasons we've teamed with FSG, is their access to this AEPA co-op and the ability to, these pre-negotiated contracts with, I believe, all 50 states and 4 territories, from what Bernie said, even if the co-ops are not in every state, but I think it covers all 50 states. It's really a great advantage there. And I'm really excited that, when I look down the list of attendees, I think we have We have over 20 states represented, from the Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, South, Midwest, Southwest, Pacific Northwest, and I'll call California its own section because there are so many people from California. I'm excited that people have stayed up late from Asia, the Middle East, and Europe to join as well. So I think this is not, it doesn't care what region you're from. It doesn't care whether you're a public school or a parochial school. There's a nice mix there that we've got here. Everybody's facing the same issues, and we can all, you know, benefit from the same capabilities. Let me see what's going on here. Screw this up by, okay, here we go. So here's our two major products that we do for the ceiling. One is called the Krypton 11, and the magic behind the name is 11. It's pretty much good to 11-foot ceilings. If you get above an 11-foot ceilings, we need more strength, and that's where this Krypton 36 comes in. This is good to 36-foot ceilings. So as we'll look at on an example floor plan, if you've got dining facilities or gymnasiums or atriums or larger gathering rooms, an amphitheater or an auditorium, it tends to be the Krypton 36. For most of the other areas, the classrooms, the bathrooms, the hallways, if you were to do those, you might be looking at a Krypton 11 to do that. This was the area we talked about with Boeing. And so in this case, it's a pretty different animal. So what this is a much more powerful, it's still 222 nanometer wavelengths, but it's much more powerful, such that it's not currently allowed to directly expose skin to it. So you have to wear PPE, gloves, and a face shield or whatnot. But the product we're rolling out now there, instead of taking 16 minutes to get to a 1 log reduction or 90%, we can get a 99.9% disinfection on a surface from 4 inches in about 1 second. And so it's a little bit more like a Star Trek thing where it's literally just immediately everything's gone. Of course, it's not as easy, you know, that's just treating it. As soon as you walk away, it could become recontaminated. So I think that the trickle continuous aspect of our ceiling lights is more for an occupied space. These are actually being used for cockpit disinfection in between flight crews. So flight crews can't hear well. It's not easy for them to wear masks. There's 500 buttons that have to be cleaned, and you can't clean those very well with Clorox anyway, and you really don't want to be pouring chemicals on your electronics. So this is a way that we can disinfect a cockpit in about 10 minutes to make sure that each of the pilots are safe in between crews. And then we've got a lighter version here. And I'm not sure if this is going to be a big deal in schools or not, but I think we've got this lighter version here, which we're calling the Krypton M, or the Krypton Mobile, which isn't this powerful, but it's a lot more powerful than our lights. And the thought process there is perhaps Timmy comes in, turns out he's sick, turns out he got a positive test. He was in the nurse's room all day. Do you really want to send the nurse back in? Well, hopefully your ceiling light is dealing with a lot of that. But having maybe one of these ones, the Krypton Mobile around, can also treat that area a little bit more specifically because you know there was actually a contamination event there. We often get questions, well, what's the cost of this? This is a little bit of a busy slide, but the Krypton fixtures last about 3,000 hours, and that's a intrinsic thing to krypton chloride lamps. So if somebody tells you they last a whole lot longer, they may not have their science behind them. But the good thing you can do is you can work them in different ways so that you can get much longer life out of them. So much like if you turned on the light in your dining room, your chandelier in your dining room, and you left it on 24/7, it's not going to last even a full year, right? And so those lamps, for example, in your chandelier are probably rated for 1,500 hours. But the thing is, you turn it on when you're in there eating, and when you leave, you probably got them off most of the time. It's the same thing with this. It's the same thing with any light. You're going to get longer lifetime using them when those spaces are occupied. So if somebody is in the room we'll often attach our lights to the same lighting circuit. They turn on the light, and as soon as they do, the assumption is that room is occupied, and our lights start working alongside your regular lights. Far UV ultraviolet light actually isn't visible to the eye, so it's not going to change the color or the texture of your room. It's not going to be suddenly purple. You won't even notice it's there. It's beyond the visible spectrum. But when we're cycling it, so not only does it have longer light because you don't have the lights on all the time, but we'll also put a timer in there so that it's not on 100% of the time, even when power is fed to it. And that will often depend on the ceiling height and the use case. You know, hey, we're going to use this room from 7 to 3 o'clock. That's our school day. And so, you know, we'll assume it's 8 hours. But within that, now we've got a 9-foot ceiling. So our duty cycle is about 40%. It's actually on 3.1 hours a day. And if you multiply that by the weekdays, the lamps actually last closer to 3 to 4 years each in that application for the Krypton 11. For the Krypton 36, which is much more powerful, they actually often last well over 5 years. The cost per fixture I've got in here at $2,500. That's our MSRP. I'm excited to say through the co-op, they've pre-negotiated a discount. So I think it's 20% off of that, or it's $19.99 or $2,000, right about there. But what's interesting here is the cost per day to run that, if you amortize that over the life, is a little over a couple of dollars a day. And if you compare that, you know, it was interesting. We talked to some restaurants and they were like, well, we're just going to have somebody come in and wipe down the tables all day long. And I was like, well, how much does that person cost? Well, they're minimum wage, so it's not much. I'm like, okay, so what is that? $10 an hour. I'm like, well, you're paying $100 a day to have that person come in when these lights would have basically only cost you a couple dollars a day. So it's actually much cheaper, even though it's a capital investment, it's actually much cheaper than most of the manual options out there. Furthermore, and I think Bernie might talk about this in a little bit, COVID has been declared a national emergency in the United States. And as a result, for private nonprofits, they are eligible for FEMA public assistance funding and grants for up to 75% of the cost of the equipment and installation. And so we've been working through with people with this. I know Bernie's group at FSG has been working through these programs with people. So actually this cost can be a fraction of this as well. We do, because people don't see it, we will often also provide little pamphlets and stickers so people even realize that they're being protected in the space. And this is just something that kind of points out it's not just, you know, you can see on the left-hand side here for education, primary, secondary education, including parochial schools. This includes other types of applications like autism schools and a lot of other facilities too. In ambulances, we're in fire stations, all kinds of different areas like that. And, you know, we're happy to confirm if you're not sure, even if you're not a fully qualified nonprofit, sometimes you're still considered an essential service because of the industry you're in. Real quick, this is just an example because people are still maybe thinking, well, how many of these lights do I need in my space? And the answer is really it depends. We, unlike some systems, which the assumption is you cover everything, we would argue that it's better to at least cover your higher traffic, higher risk areas than none at all. If your solution is, well, I'm either going to buy all of it or none of it, I don't think that's the right solution. I think it really depends on your budget, what you can spend, and what your higher risk areas are. And what are some of the higher risk areas? Well, the front door down here, everybody comes in the front door at the bottom, right? So if you have one sick child in your school and they come through, they're breathing into that space. Well, you know, some kids may go left, some kids may go right, and so maybe it's contained that way, but they're still going through the front door. So that's a risk area. Any stairwells tend to be confined. Bathrooms are very confined, don't have great ventilation. They try, but it's also an area where the CDC has said, you know, every time you flush, you're aerosolizing potential virus into the room. So those are often an area we look at. Other areas of great interest are cafeterias because people take off their mask, right? If you're taking off your mask to eat, now you've got a risk profile there. Amphitheaters, gymnasiums, you're breathing hard. And of course, I know the original title of this was the classroom. There's different thoughts of the classroom, and the cost can get pretty high pretty quick. And so what we often do is we say, well, maybe not all classrooms are created equal. And in particular, if you've got an early years group with all these kids on the floor, that's kind of a petri dish. and we would recommend in general, if you're gonna have a little more protection, I would put it there. As kids get older and they understand the value and adhere to social distancing, maybe you can have less, maybe you can have 4. Some people have even said, hey, look, a lot of time the students aren't talking, but the teacher's talking the whole time. They're the ones actually putting this virus more into the space, and they're the ones, if one teacher goes down, whereas the kids you lose a few kids and you don't have to shut down the school or the classroom for that. So other people have been taking an approach to say, look, I can't afford all these, but I want to put one between the teacher and the students. Almost think of it almost like an invisible barrier. Instead of putting plexiglass there, which has a different feel to it, this is a way to still have at least some more sense of normalcy with that. And of course, everyone passes through certain doorways, so there are different areas you can do there. And what we'll work with you, we've even had some schools say, look, can we at least put them in our nurses' room first? Because if somebody we suspect is contaminated, we definitely got to cover that area. So we have seen people look at care rooms and things like that as the number one, or buses as their number one. And then I think what they look at is when they realize, hey, there are grant programs available and things like that. I think when we walk through things, people end up adding places where they say, okay, yeah, I really see the risk there. Let's at least cover those 2 areas or whatnot. So I think it's very flexible. We're happy to work with you individually on this. I think at some point it'll become so common that all our contractors will do this. But if you'd like to contact us, we're happy to spend the time. I know Bernie also has a team of people who will work on layouts with you as well, I believe. I'm correct, Bernie, on that. So, we're happy to help. The other area, of course, is the buses. And I mentioned that, some areas are requiring everybody to keep all the windows open. We've had whole passenger bus lines convert over to this. We're not going to get rid of everything, but we're going to make it a whole lot better. And the first and foremost starts with up by the driver here. Again, kind of the same teacher-student concept. But even it's nice because within this, you don't actually need that many lights. 2 or 3 lights can do it. And I've got an example here. I can't show you all the buses we've converted for the military because those are not supposed to be shown. But, it's a pretty easy installation, straightforward. And I think it really addresses a hot button and a close proximity issue that a lot of people are having. So with that, I think I'm going to hand it back over to Bernie to finish up here. I don't know what can you take over from you, or do I need to do something?
Yeah, let me just pop back to the wrap up. And obviously, we don't need to go through all of those again. All right, so, oh, didn't work there, hold on. There we go. So again, for the co-op, just to talk a bit, last few minutes here about the co-op itself. If you are a member of the co-op already and you're on the call or you're going to watch this video, which by the way, we are recording this and we are going to put it on our webinar, UV webinar website, www.uvwebinars.com, uvwebinarsplural.com, and it will be posted there in a day or 2, along with other webinars that we have on the topic. But aepa.lighting, that's our landing page for the co-op. We do have a ordering site where co-op members can order on that site. When you go to this landing page, again, this is aepa.lighting. There's an order now button and you can go to that ordering portal. The AEPA contract includes a bunch of different things: installation services, training, lighting materials, regular lighting as well as UV, and it's also on the co-op site. Is, you know, if you have the punch out site with AEPA, we have an ability to do interest-free financing on these. If you're trying to come up with a way to be able to implement, where we can have that. You know, where are some of the schools that we've been working with in terms of disinfection throughout the United States? We have been doing schools all over the country with Montana's highlighted red for no other reason other than it doesn't mean it's red because of any sort of sicknesses. I had just done a presentation to Montana and didn't turn those black again. But yes, we've been doing this type of work all over the United States. And PJ also mentioned about the FEMA grants, the CARES money. If you go to our website, you can either go to this landing page and it'll take you there, or you go to that uvwebinars.com. We do have a webinar that we recorded on applying for FEMA money and how it works with your local FEMA organization, and also how the CARES money is working, how HUD money is working, and there are multiple different pockets and ways that this can be approached.